Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's so good to have you here on this Tuesday. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. First and foremost, I got to thank my Louisiana buddies, a mom and daughter duo, who gifted me with this LSU shirt. Now, you guys know I'm a big Clemson Tiger fan, but we are on the struggle bus. And I'm not going to mention the fact that LSU beat us in the national championship because, Joe Burrow played a heck of a game. So I love this shirt. And you know what? Honestly, if you're not playing Clemson, I'm rooting for you. So thank you so much for thinking of me, ladies. You guys were so fun to talk to. I appreciate you both. Also, big thanks to everybody for the super chats and the donations yesterday. I really appreciate you guys as well. Music fact of the day, the Guess Who's hit song, American Woman. That song was actually fully improvised in front of an audience, and then the band forgot it. But here's the good news. There was a bootlegger in the audience that recorded that song. They were able to get that later, go into the studio, and give us such a great classic song. There you go. Now you know. We're going to start off talking about Cleveland, Ohio, because I'm going to tell you guys, my jaw dropped today when I read a story about the fact that 45 kids in Cleveland have gone missing in the month of September alone. And for the year total, 1,072 kids are missing. Now, Ohio Attorney General David Yost says that sometimes the data is not entered thoroughly and those numbers can represent repeat runaways, but still, this is just an astronomical number. Last year, there were 15,000 children reported as missing in Ohio. Now, police were able to locate 96% of those children, but as that calendar year turned over into 2023, 615 of those children were still missing. 4 of those were found deceased. 8,525 of those missing were runaways, and that's where the child voluntarily left without permission and at least stayed somewhere overnight. 34 of those were abductions from a non-custodial parent, and 5 were victims of a stranger abducting them. They compared these numbers to a city in Colorado called Aurora, which has the same population numbers as Cleveland. And in 2021, they saw 4,594 children go missing. 3 of those were kidnappings, and 7,471 were labeled as not suspicious, and 56 were deemed as unknown circumstances. The family of 15-year-old Keyshawn Williams is desperate for answers because he never returned from a house party he went to on June 17th. An Amber Alert for him is still active. Now, what's the family doing? They're taking matters into their own hands and organizing canvases of certain areas. His grandmother, Mary Williams, told News 5 Cleveland, she says, "If it is beyond and something unthinkable has happened, I know God is there. God is with him and he's protected. Wherever he is, God is. I know that." Now, Keyshawn's mother, Sharice Snowden, told News 5, "It's been over 40 days without my child. I just want him back home. I miss my child every day. I'm worried. I don't know if he's eating or sleeping. I just want him back home." I can't imagine, guys, not knowing where my baby was. Now, John Majoy, he is the president of Cleveland Missing and police chief of Village Newborough Heights, said the public is their greatest asset when it comes to finding missing kids because they can't do this without the public. He said there's just not enough police officers on the streets to do this as law enforcement. Another child that's missing from Cleveland is 14-year-old Gideon Hefner. He was last seen just on September 12th from American Township. He was wearing a dark colored shirt, jeans, a black beanie, and carrying a backpack at the time. Now, I have some graphics here on YouTube that shows 6 kids that are among the many missing there in Ohio. I've had a lot of people reach out to me today as well, because I have put this out on social media, who are worried that human trafficking could be involved because apparently this area is notorious for human trafficking. So let's just hope that we figure out what the heck's going on and that these babies are found and brought home. That many kids in one area to go missing all within a year. How terrifying. I don't know what's going on there, but we got to figure out what's up. And this is just a staggering number of kids that have vanished. And even including runaways, that's still a child that's missing. You think about our kids on the internet, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever. Make sure you talk to your kids about the dangers of the internet and how people can earn your trust only to deceive you and hurt you. It is a dangerous world we live in, and it's a scary thought, but our kids are sitting ducks, and it's our responsibility to reiterate to them all the time about the dangers of talking to people online they don't know. People can be very convincing and know exactly what to say to gain trust of young kids, teenagers, even adults. We all need to be more careful. So moving on to Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. The bond hearing that was scheduled for last week has been continued until October 5th. That was originally scheduled for last Monday, the 18th, but attorneys say they need more time to review these huge amounts of discovery in this case. There is also a pretrial hearing regarding the minor children of Ruby that is set for October 17th. Now, 3 warrants were served not too long after Ruby and Jodi were arrested. A search warrant of Jodi's residence showed 2 bowls with red liquids in them and metal spoons, 3 ropes, 2 handcuffs, papers, sticky notes, journals, tape, saran wrap, medical gauze, bandages, a black book, smartphones, laptops, and paperwork were all taken. A statement from Ruby's 12-year-old son, the young man who was able to escape and go call for help with a neighbor, he was said to be abnormally thin and weak, and also, as we had heard, had open wounds on his body. He and his sister were both described as having deep lacerations from being tied up with rope. He told investigators the rope was used to tie them to the ground and that Jodi would put the ropes on their ankles and their wrists. He also said that they would use cayenne pepper and honey to dress and treat his open wounds. Cayenne pepper, really? On an open wound? Can you imagine? By the way, they found that mixture next to some medical gauze. The boy also told investigators that his 10-year-old and 14-year-old siblings were still in the house. Now, when officers went in, we know they found the 10-year-old. The 14-year-old was not at home at that time during the initial search. Investigators also found what they're calling a possible safe room in the basement. That door was locked and the room wasn't mentioned again in the warrants. It's very curious. Wonder what that was for. Ruby's husband has said through his attorneys that he was shocked about the abuse allegations. His attorney, Randy Kester, was on with Dan Abrams last week, and he said the first question he asked Kevin was, how could you not know about the abuse and why are you absent from your kids' lives? Randy said that Kevin and his entire family were being manipulated by a so-called professional of mental health. Of course, we know that would be Jodi Hildebrandt. He said she took over their lives. Now, other couples who worked with Jodi are echoing his sentiments. She counseled couples and families in Utah and did that under kind of a umbrella of religion, with Mormonism coming in. I don't like bringing religion in, but it is something that's kind of central in this case, and it has been mentioned. But according to her LinkedIn page, Jodi established connections in 2007. The interesting thing is, even though it was established in 2007, it wasn't registered as an LLC until April of 2018. She was also disciplined by the Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing in 2012, where she was put on probation for 18 months for unprofessional conduct. She disclosed information about a client whose name was Adam Steed. We talked about Adam previously on another episode. He was the man that she contacted the church elders as well as BYU about. He was subsequently kicked out of the school. And she also disclosed some sensitive medical information about him to 2 other therapists. Now, at the same time she had him as a client, she also had his wife as a client and allowed her to perform clinical work at her clinic. His ex-wife at the time was a mental health therapy student, obviously allowed her to have access to clients and their private information. Her license was fully reinstated back in August of 2016. Adam said that he blames Jodi for being kicked out of school and his wife divorcing him. He said their marriage started to crumble around 9 months into their sessions with Jodi, and she told the couple they needed to triple down on the number of therapy sessions that they were doing. He said he thinks his wife saw him as a threat to her and their children based on Jodi's influence in her life. Now, his ex-wife refused to comment on this case as a whole or their situation. And she did release a statement through her attorney, Chris Wharton. It said, out of respect for the judicial process and the best interest of the party's minor children, My client is not providing any further comments at this time. Adam said that as a teenager, he was a victim of sexual abuse and that Jodi would weaponize that and use it against him. He told NBC News that Jodi was blaming everything on him being a sexual addict at that point in their counseling. Jodi told Adam that every time he would say he was a victim of sexual abuse, if he mentioned he had PTSD or trauma from that horrible experience as a teenager, Jodi and his now ex-wife would confront him and say that was just the addiction of sexual abuse talking. Very dangerous stuff. Adam also said that he refused treatment for a sex and porn addiction that was recommended by Jodi. He did not feel he had those issues and felt like she was trying to force him to take those courses. According to NBC News, Jodi's lessons revolved around the concepts of truth and deception. NBC News was able to get their hands on a slideshow that she used. The slides go into how people live in distortion when they allow their wants, needs, and experiences to influence their commitments to the truth. Deleted YouTube videos from Jodi and Ruby show the two of them saying that people who are not living in truth, and this includes children, need to be cut off from their families. Several former clients of Jodi's from 2008 all the way to 2019 told NBC News that she methodically separated spouses, viewed certain behaviors as just solid evidence of addictions, and told clients to cut people off who weren't living according to what Jodi taught. 29-year-old Stephanie Jones and her husband were clients of Jodi's in 2019 for months after alleging that her husband had been abusive to her. They were referred to Jodi by the bishop of their church. And in the beginning, Stephanie thought the sessions were actually really helpful because she was being taught about codependency and boundaries for the very first time. As time went on, she didn't feel like these sessions were addressing the abuse that brought them there in the first place. And she said Jodi began treating her husband for a lust addiction. Stephanie said the theory was if you're meeting with Jodi, then you're all living in truth. And so she didn't want you talking to anyone else about your problem. She wanted you talking to people that were also living in truth. So this is where I started to feel like it kind of got cult-like. She wanted everything to stay in the group. You're not allowed to have a different opinion than she does. That's very scary because, she doesn't want you talking to other people because she's afraid you're going to be told your therapist is a wackadoodle and you need to run. When Stephanie said she wanted to leave her husband due to the abuse, Jodi told her she needed to stay with him. Stephanie feels that Jodi's sessions kept her with her husband a lot longer because their relationship did improve while they went to her sessions, but she doesn't think it was a noble effort on her ex's part. She feels like he just didn't want to get in trouble. Now, Stephanie's ex-husband is now incarcerated for an assault that is not related to her. With women, Stephanie said the focus of the groups were treated for what Jodi called control addictions. And that was given to them if they didn't have an official mental health diagnosis. Control addiction is not listed as a disorder or one that's recognized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Stephanie said, is it fair to call everyone that comes through your program an addict just because you want to be their savior? She labeled me as an addict as well, and she had me through a 12-step program for control issues. Jodi would have her write down the ways she used her addiction to her benefit, but Stephanie said she wasn't able to do so because the diagnosis by Jodi was just so abstract. She really didn't even understand it. And with men, Jodi's main focus was that sex and porn addiction, and 5 men told NBC News that she diagnosed them with addictions to both the sex and the porn addiction, even though they had never shown any signs of addiction to either one of those things. They were grouped into counseling sessions that focused on those addictions as well as lust. The sessions were for an hour weekly and also daily support calls where the men would call each other to talk about their goals with therapy. If you remember back, there was an allegation about a 3-year-old of Ruby's that was said to have been watching something on a phone. So you see this obsession with Jodi with sexual things. It's very bizarre. Some men claim they were kicked out of their house or abstained from sex with their spouses as punishment for watching pornography. Spencer Tibbetts was 16 when he was sent to Jodi for counseling after he was caught with the cell phone. He said his childhood was super sheltered and he had very limited access to technology. He got the phone secretly to play games and says he did not even know what pornography was at the time he started his sessions with Jodi. In a support call with other members, Spencer said that one man described his fantasies about incest to him. He said other men said they had been separated from their wives due to watching pornography. Spencer said ultimately his father allowed him the choice of whether or not to attend church, and that ultimately resulted in Spencer questioning his faith in general. But Jodi told him if he did not accept the Mormon God, he would never be helped through her therapy. Jodi's niece, Jessie, is also speaking out, saying she had traumatic experiences when she lived with Jodi. She spoke to the station KUTV, said as far as coverage of the case, she really hopes Jodi isn't sidelined by Ruby. She said, quote, I mean, she's so connected to what is happening. And yes, Ruby needs to be held accountable because she made those choices. She's just as guilty. But Jodi's been doing this for much longer. And that's the end of her quote. She said that Jodi is the foundation of all this by involving Ruby. She also thinks that her Aunt Jodi is the mastermind behind most of Ruby's actions. You can lead a horse to water, but it seems like they were thick as thieves. And you're not going to convince any mother to harm their child unless you're willing to have your child harmed or to do it yourself. So I got no sympathy there. I think they're both equally to blame as far as I can see at this point. Jessie lived with Jodi over 10 years ago and found Ruby's YouTube videos to be very triggering due to her own trauma. On living with Jodi, Jessie said the things I experienced while living with Jodi, I experienced being tied. I experienced being duct taped, blindfolded, severe isolation, severe emotional, spiritual, and psychological abuse. I experienced being told I shouldn't be around other people and that I was dangerous to be around. Remember when Jodi told authorities that the kids did not need to be around other children? You see that come back, and this is over a decade ago, where her niece Jessie is saying she was told the same thing about herself. She said people were afraid of her to the point that she was afraid of herself. She said, I was physically forced to sleep outside in the snow. She was isolated for up to 12 hours a day. If somebody spoke to her directly, if she wasn't wearing duct tape on her mouth, she would just have to stare at them and not respond. She also said Jodi had people who would tell her if Jessie broke any rules when she wasn't directly with her. Jessie said Jodi's whole thing, which is deeply, darkly ironic, is everything stems from shame, how horrible shame is. She said that Jodi wanted to make her life so uncomfortable that it would force the sin out. It would force her to confess. So this continuously got worse and worse and progressively more intense as far as the treatment to her. When asked if she thought Jodi used the same therapy techniques on her clients as she did with her, Jessie said, I wouldn't be surprised, but she really doesn't know. I've stayed away as much as possible from her and her world just to heal and try to salvage any life that I could possibly live. She said Jodi is remarkably convincing. She's also terrifying if you cross her, because she has and will systematically destroy your life, will destroy your reputation and your credibility. It just echoes. You see that pattern with people that have dealt with Jodi in the past say the same thing. She also said that people have raised issues with Jodi for years, but nobody listened to them. Jessie said, we have a culture of not believing children and not trusting children. And also, children trust their parents and the parents trust the church. Jodi surrendered her mental health counseling license, by the way, on September 19th. Her license remains active, but she cannot practice should she be released from jail before trial. And by the way, she's not being formally disciplined at this point. So you guys have asked for it, and I just got a stack of letters when I got back from vacation from my contact in prison. Right now, their tablet system is down. And so we're going to talk about ADSEG, being in segregation, in the shoe, in the hole. There's a lot of nicknames for it. Now, she chose to be in segregation. She is a very no drama kind of person, avoids it at all costs. So if things look like they're heating up, she'll ask to go to ADSEG. A lot of times they'll just let her. It's usually reserved for someone who has severe discipline issues, needs protection, is a major disturbance in general population, or has behavioral issues that doesn't meet the criteria for like the psych ward, but prohibits them from functioning normally and safely in general population. She said, if you imagine a mall with shops on both sides, and then you shrink that down to a 15-foot wide hallway, and then you got shops on each side that are equal sized, 7x9, and 16 cells lined up with large mechanical doors. That's what the ADSEG she's in looks like. She said that there's an information booth that sits in the middle, and on the opposite side of the booth is where a shower, a janitor's closet, and she says a small room containing the most beautiful thing ever, a Coke machine. So if you live in the South, either you're Coke or Pepsi. It's kind of like your college football rivals. Very few people like it interchangeably. I don't drink soda, but back when I did, I was definitely a Pepsi girl. She was a Coke girl. That was her preference. Now, Coke was invented in Atlanta, Georgia, and then Pepsi in New Bern, North Carolina. Here in Greenville, we have a big Pepsi plant. We're stuck in the middle. Lines are drawn in the sand. And by the way, for her, it costs $9 for 5 drink tickets to get a Coke. On her side of the hall, back in 2015, the first 4 cells were used for inmates who didn't have discipline issues, but needed re-socializing before going back into general population. They had a TV, a shower, and a phone in their cells, and they were allowed to commingle. Today, they use those cells for people that spit, bite, and others who pose those kind of threats to inmates and staff out in the general areas. The recreational space is a large room with exercise equipment, a toilet that has a short wall for privacy so you're not covered. Y'all, I would die from not going to the bathroom if I went to jail or prison because there's no way. It would be like a burst bladder or something. Also in that room, there's mesh windows that wrap around the top of the room like wallpaper. So the fresh air from outside would flow inside, and that was considered yard space or outdoor space because that air flowed in. Inside the cell, when you walk in the door, there's a 7-foot metal slab that fills the entire back wall. On top of that is a frosted window. The mat is 6 inches thick that you sleep on, and you sit on top of a metal bunk. She said a lot of inmates have arthritis, pain in their joints due to the fact that they're sleeping on 6-inch mattresses, if you can even call them that. You have a toilet and sink combo pedestal, and to the left of the toilet is a desk and a stool that is stationary and bolted to the floor. Between the desk and the door, there are 2 hooks for towels, and these are designed to flip down if too much weight is applied to them, which stops self-harm. So what does her day in ADSEG look like? Well, breakfast comes at 4:30 in the morning. Y'all, I don't eat breakfast anyway, but 4:30 in the morning, I'd probably throw a piece of sausage at you if you wake me up. She had eggs, sausage, oatmeal, milk, 2 slices of bread, and an apple. She ate, went back to bed. Around 7 or 8, she gets woken up by a cell being pressure washed due to the girl being creative with her bodily waste. Although she was in the last cell, you could smell that all over ADSEG. She said they will move this girl to another cell. She's got a fresh new cell, and she'll just do the same thing again. It's a cycle. Said a lot of the prisoners in there don't shower, and a lot of the homeless inmates actually literally have problems using a toilet and will just go on the floor. Sometimes she has to choose between taking a shower and phone time. She said she will do a little bird bath in the sink if she has plans to make a call. After the pressure washing was done that day, the medications arrived. Those are dispensed by a registered nurse. After her meds, she gets 1 hour of day room time. This is when she can shower. The showers are timed. You have to push down 2 buttons. That gives you 2 minutes of water. You soap up, push the button again 2 times for 2 more minutes of water. You rinse and repeat until you're done. After her hour of yard time is up, she is locked down again. Then lunch arrives, which is a tomato-based soup with a lot of corn and a spicy bologna and cheese sandwich. She developed a workout routine for 30 minutes a day to keep her muscles from shrinking due to the inability to move around in segregation. She did arms on Monday, legs on Wednesday. Saturday is butt workouts. The other days, she works on her core. Sundays, she reserves for stretching and yoga. After her workout is done for the day, she will read and write until dinner is served, which is around 4:30 p.m. After dinner, she'll take a bird bath where she uses the cardboard lunch bucket in the sink, fills that up with soapy water because you don't have a stopper in that sink. To clean her cell, she will wad up toilet paper and use that to sweep hair, dust, crumbs, stuff like that from the floor. She uses a clean soup cup to make soapy water to pour on the floor. Then she will use 1 sock and get on her hands and knees to mop the floor. She said this is essential to do because it controls ants in your cell. If you don't kill them and keep your floor really clean, you could be overrun by ants within an hour's time. She will use the matching sock to soap up and wipe down her bed, her desk, her sink, the walls, the door, and the toilet. The reason she doesn't use the facility mops or brooms to clean is because the overwhelming smell of urine and feces on the mops. They don't use 1 mop or broom to clean that kind of a mess up, and then you get a separate one that's used to clean cells. It's the same mop, so she just doesn't even use it. By the way, her dinner was breaded chicken bites, mac and cheese, peas and carrots, salad, mini Oreos, and milk. She also talks about being indigent or not having people on the outside to put money on your books. One time she ran out of toothpaste, and rather than asking somebody and owing somebody, which is something you don't want in prison, is to owe anybody anything, she brushed her teeth with what she calls an indigent soap bar for a week until her commissary came in. She said prison makes you beg for bare necessities. She said it falls on family to fund commissary because prison jobs don't even begin to cover the cost of even your basic things you need for hygiene. Average cost for canteen is around $240 a month for necessities and a few luxuries, or like her facility does quarterly boxes, you have between $250 and $300 a month that you would need to supply yourself each quarter with just necessities. She said making prisoners codependent for basic things defeats the efforts to make inmates more independent and to be ready to rejoin society if they're not lifers. The girl in the cell next to her has problems dealing with her childhood trauma and often does what is known in the prison system as takes flight. That is just a slang word for she likes to fight. It lands her in ADSEG often. She said the girl at her core is very kind-hearted. When my contact first got there, this girl gave her personal hygiene products. But again, this girl's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like a lot of inmates. They can switch that on a dime and become a big threat. This is why she said she never is able to fully be comfortable and relax and not look over her shoulder, is because you have so many people like that with the ability to turn on a dime. And then you're at risk of being a victim. Another neighbor was in prison for the 6th time. She said, whether you're in segregation or general population, being a lifer means every day that passes only leads you one day closer to death and nowhere else. Her thoughts in general on the criminal justice system. A lot of you have inboxed me and asked me what she thinks. She said the current criminal justice system doesn't deter or diminish criminal activities. There's no reform, rehabilitation, or prevention of the release of dangerous criminals to any degree that rises to anything that she would see as a level of success. She said that doesn't mean it doesn't hold the capability of accomplishing all those things we expect from our criminal justice system. She has seen these successes where rehabilitation is obtained, but they're rare. In her facility, they limited educational programs to 2 hours a day. All that extra time led to trouble. They also started what she calls a RAC system. It's RAC. That credits you for attending rehabilitation programs, which leads to inmates chasing time off their sentence just by attending and not using the program to actually rehabilitate themselves. There's no treatment plan, there's no roadmap, or even a basic guide in helping these inmates choose what program they're going to do. She thinks if good behavior was rewarded instead of time off for attending rehabilitation classes, the system as a whole would be better. Most people in charge of the criminal justice system are on the outside looking in. So for 12 years, she's lived among some of the most vile offenders, and she feared their eventual release back into society. Some of those do not have to earn their parole since they have straight sentences, but they're not a life sentence. She gives the example of one inmate who beats her lover with electric cords, abuses elderly inmates, and also is in and out of ADSEG due to extortion and violence. But even with all that, this inmate is due to be released later this year. They all think she'll end up back in there for good eventually by killing somebody. She knew another inmate similar to that one who was released and back within 6 months for murder and got life. She also thinks that district attorneys should not make deals with violent criminals in exchange for testimony, resulting in overshadowing public safety. She knows women out on their second and third homicide cases, and 2 of them haven't gotten a life sentence yet. But on the flip side, she has seen life sentences handed down to women who were just victims of over-prosecution. She gives the example of a woman who killed out of self-defense. Someone fired a warning shot, killed the man, and got life without parole. She said the funnel into prison has a wide mouth, and once you're in the system, those flaws begin. Many stays in jail over and over. The 3-strike law can't apply to low-level habitual criminals. It's like a revolving door with some of these inmates. She's met inmates who have been in 10 to 20 times before they finally get a sentence with some meat on it. The lack of programs to address behavior problems is appalling. She says jail stays are usually brief, but prisons worry about budgets and lack of staff. State budgets for jail and prisons often leave these facilities understaffed. At her facility, the psychiatric staff was only running around 70 to 75% capacity. Couple that with low salaries, weighed against the occupational hazards that come when you work in a prison, and you have the makings of an understaffed facility, which can make things go wrong really, really quickly, not only for the inmates, but for staff as well. Things get missed or overlooked. She says that few people over the criminal justice system actually see the flaws in it because that would entail staff and higher ups to actually listen to the very inmates for input that staff mostly feel aren't even worth listening to in the first place. She said, as broken as the system she has lived in is, at her core, she still believes in it. She says we need it, but we also need to fix it and make the system live up to the promise to protect, serve, deter, rehabilitate, restore, and contain. So there you have it. I wanted to throw that in, y'all. I have got so much content from her. It's not even funny. Stacks of letters. So every day this week, I'm going to do a little bit until we're all caught up on the cases that I missed last week while I was out of town. And you guys love this series. I love it too. I'm learning so much. A lot of people have said this should be used in schools to be a deterrent for kids. And hey, I'm all for it. Let's go on a speaking tour in high schools and let me convey some of this stuff to these kids that are at that threshold of making good or bad choices for the rest of their life. You know, I worked in a high school and I've seen kids who come from homes that are terrible, turn their life around, go to college, get out of it. And then you see kids who take that as a family heirloom and continue it themselves. I know students that I taught that are in prison now for murder. Anyways, that's it for today. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you soon.